If you're within a few years of retiring, I want you to notice something you're probably doing right now without realizing it. Somewhere in your head, there's a number for how bad a crash would have to get before you're in real trouble. And I'd bet that number came from the stock market. Down 40%, down 50%, something like that. Here's the problem. That number was never about you. It's the S&P 500's number. It assumes your entire retirement is sitting in stocks with nothing else underneath it. And unless you've actually checked, you don't know if that's true. You've just been borrowing the market's fear and calling it your own. Here's why this actually matters, and it's not abstract. There's a concept called sequence of returns risk, and once you understand it, you can't unsee it. It's this. The exact same crash, the exact same percentage drop, does wildly different things to you depending on when it happens. Lose 30% 7 years before you retire, and it barely leaves a mark. Your paycheck keeps feeding the account. The market has time to heal before you ever touch the money. Lose that same 30% 2 years into retirement while you're already pulling out money every month to cover the mortgage and groceries. And now you're selling shares while they're down just to survive the month. Every share you sell at the bottom is a share that never gets to come back. That's the version of this risk nobody explains clearly. And it's the version that can actually hurt you. So the instinct here is to go build a cash pile and call it solved. Big enough emergency fund, ride it out, done. And there's real truth underneath that instinct. Look at the history. 1987, 2020, both bounced back inside a year. The dot-com crash, 2008. Those took years, sometimes several, to fully claw back to even. And 1929 is the one that should actually humble you a little. Over 25 years before the market saw a new high again. That happened. It's real. I'm not going to pretend it can't happen again. But here's what almost nobody tells you when they show you that table, and it's the part that changes everything. That table is 100% stocks. It is not you. Unless you have deliberately built a portfolio that's entirely equities with zero bonds, zero cash, zero social security, that table was never describing your money. It was describing a retirement almost nobody actually has. So before you can even ask, how scared should I be? You have to ask a completely different question. Not what does the market do in a crash? What does your money do in a crash? Those are not the same number, and the gap between them is bigger than most people think. Let's make this real with actual money. Two retirees. Both walk into 2008 with exactly $1 million. Retiree 1 is 100% stocks, fully dependent on that portfolio for every dollar of income, basically no cash cushion. When the crisis hits, and the market falls nearly 57%, their $1 million becomes roughly $430,000. Read that number again. 430,000. And historically, it took about 5.5 years to get back to even, measured from the old peak, about 4 years measured from the bottom itself. Every withdrawal in that stretch means selling shares while the account is bleeding, just to pay ordinary bills. Retiree 2 holds 60% stocks, 30% bonds, 10% cash. Same crisis, same 2 years. Their portfolio doesn't fall 57%. It falls closer to 16%. Their $1 million drops to around $840,000, not $430,000. And that kind of portfolio has historically recovered in something like 2 to 3 years from peak to peak, 1.5 to 2 years from the bottom. Same headline, same crisis. $430,000 versus $840,000 is not a rounding error. That's the difference between panic and options. Here's the math underneath why this gap is so brutal. If your account falls 50%, you don't need a 50% gain to get back to even. You need a full 100% gain because you're climbing back from a smaller base. That's not opinion. That's arithmetic. And it's the kind of arithmetic that eats years of your life. But if a diversified portfolio only falls 10% in that same event, which is roughly what Retiree 2's numbers show, You only need about an 11% recovery to be whole again. One of those is a multi-year climb out of a hole. The other might happen inside a single good year. Same crash. Completely different sentence for your retirement, decided entirely by what was sitting in the account the day it hit. I want to be honest about where this breaks down, because if I don't tell you, someone else will use it against you later. 2022. Stocks and bonds fell together at the same time, which historically almost never happens. Diversification didn't behave the way it usually does that year. So this isn't a guarantee, it's a pattern, a very strong one, built on nearly a century of data, but a pattern, not a promise. Now, if you do get hit early in retirement, you are not standing there with no options, even though it can feel that way in the moment. There are four real levers, and knowing all four changes how this whole thing sits in your chest. You can keep withdrawing on schedule regardless of the market, mathematically clean, but it means selling into the fall on purpose, and almost nobody can do that calmly, no matter how disciplined they think they are. You can spend from a dedicated cash reserve, a year or two of expenses sitting in a high-yield savings account, so the invested money gets time to heal before you're forced to touch it. You can temporarily cut spending, skip the trip, pause the renovation, pull back 10 to 15% for a stretch, which sounds small, but can meaningfully extend how long your money lasts. Or you can lean harder on guaranteed income you already have. Social security, a pension, part-time work. So your portfolio isn't the only thing standing between you and your bills. None of these four options makes a crash pleasant. What they do is take you out of the passenger seat, the retiree who has thought through all four ahead of time, before the market ever turns, isn't reacting in a panic at 10 at night, refreshing their brokerage app. They already know what they're going to do, because they decided it on a calm day, not a terrifying one. And that difference alone changes how the whole event feels while you're living through it. I know that was a lot, all at once. Numbers and years and four different strategies stacked on top of each other. If you stayed with me through all of it, that already puts you somewhere most people never get to, because most people hear the market crashed 57% and just absorb the fear without ever checking whether that 57% had anything to do with their actual account. This is exactly the kind of thing I go deeper on for the people who support this channel on Patreon. The fuller research and the specific breakdowns that don't fit into one video. It's not a big ask. It's just a way for people who want to actually stay informed about their own retirement to do that together, instead of each of us sitting alone at midnight doing worried Googling. If that sounds like your kind of people, the link's in the description, and I'd genuinely love to have you there. So here's the one thing to actually do with everything we just covered. Stop asking what the stock market will do to you. You don't control that, and neither do I. Ask what your specific mix of stocks, bonds, cash, and social security would do to you in a repeat of 2008, because that number is sitting right there on your last statement, and most people have simply never pulled it out and looked at it directly. Bear markets are real. Sequence of returns risk is real. I'm not telling you otherwise. But the version of this fear that assumes you're standing there with 100% stocks and nothing else. That's not most retirees. And if you've done any planning at all, it's probably not you. Next time, I want to answer the question this naturally raises. Exactly how much cash you actually need sitting in that reserve. Because 1 to 2 years sounds simple until you try to calculate it for your own real spending. That's next.